Last night I was in a 5-star restaurant in Cape May, New Jersey. I thought they'd never get me back so I could go to bed to get up at 3:45 to get to my flight in Philadelphia to get here. And I've been napping all morning, so I'm all ready to go now. There were so few people on the flight, they gave me an upgrade to first class, so I had a nice big seat, coming over. Anyway, so this lady, she looked at me, she said, what do you mean food choice? I can get anything I want to. I said, you ever try to get raw milk? I mean, we live in a culture right now that says it's perfectly safe to feed your children Twinkies, Cocoa Puffs, and Mountain Dew, but that raw milk and Aunt Matilda's pickles and compost-grown tomatoes, that's a hazardous substance. Well, I say when the government gets between my lips and my throat, that's an invasion of my privacy. Each one of us has 3 trillion, you listen to that? 3 trillion beings in here. Some of us maybe more than others. But anyway, we've each got 3 trillion beings in here. And they don't know what to do with unpronounceable food. They don't know what to do with food you can't make in your kitchen. You ever tried making monosodium glutamate in your kitchen? Ever tried making high fructose corn syrup in your kitchen? The guys with King Corn, the documentary King Corn, they tried it, and they about had a laboratory set up till they could finally make it. I'm with Michael Paul, and I say pretty much anything that wasn't available before 1900, yes. Before 1900 probably shouldn't be eaten. And we can all be very thankful that hot dogs were introduced at the 1890 World's Fair in Chicago. Just kind of slipped in there under the door. The fact is that when we look at soil, when we look at our insides, just think about soil. Talk about beings. There are more beings in a double handful of healthy soil than there are people on the face of the earth. Every handful you walk around here. It's a profound thought that everything that we are and see is completely and utterly dependent on this community of individuals in the soil that we don't even see. That's a profound spiritual truth that everything physical is dependent on an invisible world. Pretty powerful. And and then the problem is that this world of intestinal microflora, the world of soil microflora, y'all know about the soil community. If you look through an electron microscope with Pat Richardson or Elaine Ingham, you'll look through this electron microscope and you'll see, 6 o'clock, there's a four-legged grazer. He's got big old mandibles, and he's got, juices flying around off him, and he's kind of grazing on little, cilia and stuff, and he's just kind of, walking along kind of a big old thing. All of a sudden, from 10 o'clock, comes in a 6-legged narwhal-looking thing with a spear on the end of his head. He comes galloping in on 6 legs, pierces the side of the bloop thing, juice flies over, he goes, he sucks it up, desiccates the bloop thing, and before the boop thing can even hit the ground, here from 2 o'clock comes in a 12-legged thing with scissors on the front of his head. He comes up, knocks the head off, eats it up, of the boop thing. This is all happening. It makes Steven Spielberg look like a kindergartner. But this is the real world. See? It is a more real world than Wall Street. It is a more real world than the White House. Okay? And the fact is, when's the last time you went in with a business plan to your banker? We're going to start this business. Banker looks at this thing and says, wow, this is the best business plan I've ever seen. We're going to be millionaires because I'm going to be your partner. But I've got one question. One thing really bothers me. What's this going to do to the actinomycetes? Ever had somebody ask that? What's this going to do to the earthworms? What's this going to do to your marriage? You know, we all, don't we understand, those are all important questions. Probably more important than the business plan. And yet, you know, we don't think about it in the shower in the morning. What I'd like to see is, I'd like to see us finally, I'm not talking about some mystical thing, I'm talking about a real, visceral understanding, a consciousness daily that we think about these things. I think that would be healthy as a culture, to come to these things and think about these kind of things. So, we need to be able to punch through this whole notion of cheap food, food is food, and that whole thing's just stupid, crazy, scrambled brains. Number 2, the second great axiom of our culture: size equals efficiency. Bigger is better. A bigger farm is always more efficient than a smaller farm. A 100,000-acre farm is always more efficient than a backyard garden. A Tyson chicken house is always more efficient than a backyard flock. A monstrous ranch is always more efficient than a farmstead or a homestead. Well, I beg to differ. Because, see, when we are depending on scale and on materials handling and transport, then, yeah, there are tremendous economies of scale. But if we design an agriculture, a food production system in which animals do the work, suddenly the profit potential becomes size neutral and everything scales up and down. For example, on our farm, some of you know this, but for those of you who came in late, I'll describe it. In the winter, when we feed hay, we feed under an awning, just a shed, just a crude shed. It could be this tent for that matter. And because those cows are dropping 50 pounds of goodies out their back end every day. That's a lot of stuff. And so we soak it up with a carbonaceous diaper, all right, so that if it gets dry, it doesn't vaporize, and if it gets wet, it doesn't leach into the groundwater. And we let this carbonaceous diaper, it can be straw, old hay, wood chips, sawdust, peanut hulls, you know, anything, carbonaceous. And this bedding builds up. The cows are walking on it. They're tromping out the oxygen, so it's anaerobic. It's fermenting. We add corn to it as it builds. The cows tromp in the corn. So in the spring, when the cows go back out to graze, we've got this 3 to 4 foot deep bedding pack of fermented carbon, nitrogen, anaerobic, full of fermented corn. Okay? Then we put in the pigorators. And all pigs have a sign on their forehead. You know, we'll work for corn. The pigs go in, and all these 4-wheel drive pigs have a plow already on their front end. And so they go in seeking this fermented corn and fluff up this bedding, oxygenate it, aerate it, and turn the whole thing into aerobic compost without us having to handle it, without us having to turn it. You know, none of this, you know, petroleum, heavy metal, or anything. So we're suddenly using these pigs as machines. And we don't even have to drive them. They don't need the oil change. They don't need spare parts. You know, and what a retirement program, when you're done with them, you eat them. You know, you don't even have to worry about social insecurity or anything. You know, we just turn them loose in there. They do all this wonderful aeration, and we can just go back to the house and read Mother Earth News magazine. See? Makes for a great quality of life. And the pigs love it. You know, we're not asking them to do something they don't like to do. It's providing them a habitat that allows them to fully express their pigness. See, we live in a culture that doesn't ask, how do we create a habitat that allows the pig to express its pigness? All we ask is, how do we grow it faster, fatter, bigger, and cheaper? And we all know that that's not noble. I mean, that's why the average NFL football player is dead at 57. You know, they're freaks. When your neck is bigger than your head, you're a freak, and nature weeds you out. So, these pigs then are not only doing the work for us, and because we're using non-depreciable machinery, we're using appreciating machinery, buying them for $50 and selling them for $500. That's the way I like to buy tractors. You know, we don't even have to steer them. I mean, they're better than a GPS monitor. You know, they just steer themselves, sniff it out, you know, and go get it. And they do this. And the neat thing about this is it completely changes our relationship with the pigs, because now they're not just bacon and pork chops. They become co-laborers, co-conspirators, ministers in this great land healing ministry. And that fundamentally changes the spiritual and emotional relationship we have with what's under our care. Cows. Cows are out in the field, they're now grazing, and they're pooping this 50 pounds, you know, out in the pasture. So we look and say, well, before Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer Pharmaceuticals and Ivomec and all this stuff came along, how does nature sanitize behind herbivores? So we look, guess what? Birds follow herbivores. You know, the egret on the rhino's nose, the flocks of birds that follow the wildebeest on the Serengeti. And so we follow the cows with eggmobiles. And the chickens scratch through the cow dung, eat out the fly larvae. By the way, all of this at 3 o'clock, yeah, I'll be showing pictures of all this. It was too bright in here to show pictures, so I'll show pictures during a 2-hour workshop of all this stuff later this afternoon. That's the advertisement, by the way. So I don't want everybody to think that, you know, this is all I can say. There's more I can say. Just allay your fears, you know. It's serious. All right. So the chickens then scratch through the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, spread out the cow patties, and eat the grasshoppers and crickets that have now been uncovered by the cows grazing. And so we get several $100,000 worth of eggs a year as a byproduct of the pasture sanitation program. See? The cows are eating grass. You know, I think it's pretty amazing that that the U.S. took farmers like us to steak dinners for 30 years to teach us this new progressive scientific way of feeding cows, where we take dead cows and grind them up and feed them back to cows. And then now, 30 years later, there's this big collective, you know, oops, maybe we shouldn't ought have done that. And this agency actually positions itself as a repository of food safety after they gave us bovine spongiform encephalopathy, also known as mad cow. You got to learn to say some of these big words. You know, it's kind of like learning to say some of the names in the Old Testament and the Bible. That way you sound educated. You know, you don't have to say it right, just say it fast, and everybody will think you're smart. But these herbivores are eating grass. An herbivore is basically a four-legged portable fermentation tank, sauerkraut vat. They're not supposed to eat grain, silage, dead cows, chicken manure, chicken feathers, okay? And so when we let the animals do their work, suddenly that having to get big or get out starts to fall by the wayside. In fact, we know biomimicry is always more efficient. And biomimicry, the